Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Distinguished guests, Assalamu alaikum. It's a real privilege and a pleasure to be here to be hosting the next panel session. We've got a really distinguished panel of guests, and we've got a really nice topic that we're going to be taking on today. The topic for this session is the pathways to prosperity. I was in the VIP lounge just before we came on, and I mentioned to one of the earlier speakers, no less than Naz Shah, that we were doing the next session, which is Pathways to Prosperity, and she said, easy, come to Bradford, right? Isn't that the answer? I've never actually been to a conference where there's been so much mention of Bradford, so it's great to see another one of our speakers there, and I will add to that and say I'm also from Bradford, so I think we really are taking over today. So, in terms of the topic, Pathways to Prosperity, unpacking the core tenets of Islamic economic priorities. If I just explain a little bit about my own background and then sort of we can get into the session. So I'm a partner, as Ibrahim mentioned, at DLA Piper, and I lead the global Islamic finance disputes practice at DLA Piper, as well as act on both conventional Islamic finance, cross-border disputes and investigations. When I came into law 20 years ago, a lot of the terminology that I was hearing then, that was being used by lawyers, by practitioners, by people in the industry, was around language such as derivatives, securitization, leveraged finance. Fast forward, in the last few years, 3, 4, 5 years, we see terminology, as Umar was saying earlier, sustainability, collaboration, financial inclusion. And when I think about the evolution of the last 15, 20 years, these are inherently Islamic principles. When we talk about financial inclusion, when we talk about collaboration, risk sharing, parties not exploiting one another, these are essentially Islamic finance principles. And to me, it almost feels like the industry is starting to realize that the real true measure of success is how well you collaborate, how well you're looking at long-term sustainable impact. So it's wonderful to have a really fascinating panel of speakers with us today. And what we will be doing is trying to go through this session in a slightly systematic way. What I'd like to understand from our speakers is, number one, what are the challenges, genuinely, what are the challenges that Islamic finance industry or the Islamic finance economy is facing? I would then like to explore what are the tools, how are we embracing things such as technology and innovation, and then finally, from a very practical perspective, how is this actually working and what are the case studies that we can look to? So hopefully we'll be able to go from being from not just having a very theoretical discussion, but also understanding from a practical perspective, what are the real pathways to prosperity using Islamic finance? So if I can go to my first speaker for this session, and the structure will be similar to the sessions that we've had earlier today, which is we'll hear from each of the panelists. They'll talk about their session for 10 minutes, and then we'll have some questions. I will ask some questions. We'll open it to the floor, and hopefully we can have quite an interactive and lively debate. Now, my first speaker is Mr. Mohammed Kabir Mohammed, who is the Chief Compliance Officer at Taj Bank Limited. He was the former CFO of the First Islamic Bank of Nigeria. And what I'd like Mohammed Kabir to talk about is really the challenges that he sees in the industry. So what are the challenges of developing communities and countries through the lens of Islamic finance? So, Mohammed.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's my extreme pleasure to be with you this afternoon, and I thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to speak to this audience about this topic. So, talking about the challenges of developing communities and countries through the lens of Islamic economy, I'll be covering this breadth in my presentation. So let me start by spending a minute or two looking at a number of development indicators as it relates to the Muslim world. Should I say that I'm happy to see numbers? I must be frank with you, no. So first, a warning, because this is not an academic paper, and for me, as a resident of the OIC, I look at these numbers from a more personal and more in-depth connection, because it speaks to our reality as Muslims or members of the OIC. When you talk about economic development or developing communities and countries from the lens of Islamic finance, so much has been said by the previous speakers in the morning session and in the last session. But looking at these numbers, starting from where these countries are in terms of inflation, when you compare them with the rest of the world, you will see a trend telling you that in terms of inflation, these countries are not doing well. We know inflation tends to deprive the value of money from individuals, which is an indicator that can push people to poverty. When we look at other important economic indicators like life expectancy, you will see that these countries are also not doing well when compared with the rest of the world. In terms of population, of course, we account for about 20% of the global population, and the growth rate of population is also much higher than the rest of the world. So it's a double-edged sword. When you do the right thing, population can be an asset, but if you're not doing the right thing, a very large population can be a problem. In the previous session, we had the moderator speaking about where the bulk of the refugees in the world are coming from. Yes, indeed, it's also a barometer here, about 50% of refugees, and this is before the current geopolitical crisis in the Middle East, which means this number is bound to move northwards. And again, when we look at the size of this economy in terms of GDP, the big tech in the world has finally caught up with the OIC. So the total market capitalization of big tech is now equivalent to the total GDP of the OIC. So should this excite me to say that we're really putting practice to the theories we had since morning? No. And because, like I said, speaking from sub-Saharan Africa, from a country with 50% Muslims, this reality is biting hard on a daily basis. We're not able to see practice in terms of applying Islamic economic theory. But very importantly, Islamic economics has a very deep nexus with development because it speaks to a dimension or paradigm that should push development from the concept of justice, of fairness, ensuring that you don't leave any individual or group behind, social justice, prohibition of riba, to ensure that there are no exploitation in commercial or financial transactions. Risk sharing is encouraged. Avoidance of gharar, speculation, to ensure that we are not building bubbles in our economic systems. Environmental stewardship is encouraged. Accountability for how we use resources. All these are elements that we see that shows us that we have a system. The only challenge is how are we able to apply the system. Obviously, there are a number of challenges from my own perspective as a citizen of OIC. First, we have issues around weaker institutions that are unable to help drive the reality in terms of what the Islamic economy is supposed to deliver. Secondly, we don't live in isolation. We're a subset of the global economic system, so there's no proper integration. Lack of awareness in terms of the understanding of the Islamic economic system by policymakers. Also, issue of diverse interpretation, because there are different schools of thoughts in the Islamic Sharia. That tends to be also a problem in terms of standardization, and of course, corruption, which is endemic. Now, going deeper into these challenges, from the perspective of infrastructure, you require a very robust structure for you to drive any system. And where there is no frameworks and structures that will guide the implementation of these elements that we've seen from Islamic economic system, you're bound to have lagging developments in these countries. Global economic integration is also an issue because the global north is really driving based on interest-based system. For the Muslim world to connect and drive the economic development, there has to be a seamless connection between the riba-free system and the riba-based system, which we've not seen a very effective handshake. Again, lack of expertise, or I'll put it, lack of political will is an issue. We've not seen enough in terms of symbiosis between the people in policy-making position in these countries and people from the academia. So the gown and the town are not coming together to drive the needle in terms of development, using these ideas from Islamic economic theory. The diverse interpretation, I've seen it in practice as an Islamic banker, particularly when you're doing cross-border transactions. You see a structure approved by the Sharia board of one Islamic bank, but the counterparty bank may not be able to consume that transaction seamlessly because its own Sharia board is construing the structure presented by the other bank as not really Sharia compliant and would be asking for amendments and changes to be made. Whereas if you're dealing with conventional contracts, it's seamless. The documentation is very simple. The structure is all one and the same. It's all, debt-based instruments you're dealing with. So this tends to be a problem in reality. Now, endemic corruption is a major issue from the OIC. If you look at the Corruption Perception Index, you will see that only 2 countries from the OIC are among the top 50 in terms of transparency, which leaves the bulk of the other countries at the bottom. And we know corruption is a major issue that competes with economic development. Now, all hope is not lost. Coming from a small community, we tried lately to put into practice some of these elements and to see how we can, in our small way, try to move and impact economic development. So we experimented with putting together a structure that deals with a participatory contract called Mudaraba, and we add a card-based system and a Sadaqah to try and see how we can touch the lives of rural women. We gave them financing, and that financing comes with other elements. It encourages them to save. In fact, savings is compulsory as part of the system, and it gives them also a life policy that covers them against accident, theft, permanent disability, or fire. And lastly, it also provides them with a health insurance. And we've seen a very huge impact because it took them out of poverty. Not only that, we also saw some qualitative measures in terms of the primary school enrollment rate in that community shoot up because little kids need not to hawk goods around. They can now go to school because their mothers have small capital to be able to support the families. And lastly, infant mortality rate goes down, and the society was much happier because there's a little intervention from a small group of individuals. So I'll stop here. I believe for us to really move the needle in terms of economic development, we have to individually make our effort from the private sector, public sector, and even from the non-governmental institutions to be able to move and impact the society. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed. So I think that's a really helpful way to contextualize the discussion. So my key takeaways from what Mohammed was saying, if I could try and summarize in terms of challenges, one, I think there is a lack of financial integration across the various economies that makes this more difficult. There is a potential lack of institutional infrastructure, partly, I assume, due to a lack of political will. We can discuss more of that later. And thirdly, I think one of the points that you raised there was the corruption index, which naturally, therefore, makes it more, increases the confidence for investment into certain industries and sectors much more difficult. Now, I want to move the conversation on, having looked at the challenges, to how Islamic finance principles in particular can help solve some of these issues, some of these challenges that we're seeing, but particularly through innovation. And so my next speaker is arguably the most qualified person in the room when he was telling me his background. So he went to medical school, so arguably he's a quasi-doctor. He's also been to law school, so we've got a doctor and a lawyer in the room. He is the managing director of XTCC, which is the Exchange Traded Carbon Credits, so he has a vested interest in all things sustainability and climate. So Vladimir Malenko, if I can ask you to do your presentation on Islamic finance principles and how they can drive some of the growth in the industry.
Okay, thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. Rahmatullahi barakatuh. Basically, just imagine how difficult it is to do Islamic finance being named Vladimir, especially in the last couple of years. But I've been in Islamic finance for the last 7-8 years. Well, to establish that I'm a bona fide speaker, I tell you that I created the first digital sukuk, first digital waqf. Well, in 3 months, we're going to come up with the first nuclear energy sukuk, microfinance operations based on palladium. And the XTCC is the one I represent. It's the very first Sharia-compliant climate change finance investment instrument. Why it's first? Because we are the only one that actually has a fatwa issued here in London by Yassar Research. Anyway, but I'm not here to talk about that yet. Basically, I'm here to talk about innovation. Just remember these golden years of Islam, where the word Islam was synonymous with the innovation, with the development of culture, with development of science. Just look at the Wikipedia to see some of the scholars of that era, and Wikipedia gave me 300 names. I mean, we all know Ibn Sina or Ibn Rushd, but I never expected this number to be so high. So let's talk about the very first issue I'm here to talk is about education. Can you teach entrepreneurship, or can you learn entrepreneurship? Technically, yes, you can. There are 3 ways how it is done. It's formal education, like there is Babson College in America. There is always ranked #1 in entrepreneurship studies. There's informal education through mentorship, and there is a collective informal study, which is incubators, accelerators. So basically, if you are really good at IT, or if you are really good at idea generation, that doesn't make you an entrepreneur. Unfortunately, you have to learn some mundane stuff like marketing, I'm sorry, I apologize for that, sales, and even accounting. So that's what makes you an entrepreneur. Without this, you cannot do that. One of the innovative ways to put it up, I'm not going to talk about schools. Everybody knows about universities, but the Waqf, Right now, in Malaysia, our DG Waqf and Waqf that belongs to Security Commission of Malaysia, they are using the proceeds of Waqf to fund accelerators, especially for Islamic businesses. There is a bank in Tajikistan that was set up by 3 UK university graduates. The country established the very first IT school where the bank pays for 400 people to go through this program with no obligations. They don't have to, upon graduation, they don't have to go work for the bank. They can do anything. And their moral principles force them to do that. So Sber, I'm going to leave out because it's just not actual anymore. Right now, it's sort of like a dirty word. I was talking about Sberbank. So ethical leadership is the second very important point. How many scandals do you know that involve Sharia-compliant companies? Well, there are some. Yeah, Saad Group, I don't know, Dana Oil, Garuda, NHS Health. But the last 3 are probably, well, with the exception of Saad Group, they're more of a mismanagement, not actual fraud. So the ethical imperative is very important, and it comes from Islam. For example, in our calculations, in our work with companies, we use the concept of total economic return to the Ummah. Well, it's not just you value not just the contribution of the company or its capital growth or its valuation, but what else it brings to the society. You combine both. Let's take Tesla, for example. You know the guy who behind Tesla, you know him, well, he's done really well for himself. But has it done well for us as a community? Ummah or just the global society? Yes, it's very hard to overestimate his contribution. So his total impact is much, much larger than his personal impact. And XTCC, our company, is actually, as a climate pioneer, it combines innovation because we work with carbon credits, ethics because it works with climate change, and profit, of course, because we do deliver profit, and ethical principles of Islam because we are Sharia compliant and we do the structured instrument where we combine sukuk and carbon credits, so the principle is protected. None of our investors will ever lose money, even the carbon credits are abolished tomorrow, which I don't believe will happen. The next is my favorite topic is how startups and SMEs are supported through Islamic finance. For example, the first one is, once again, I go to Alif Bank, Tajikistan, just regular services to unbanked populations. In Tajikistan, 98%, in Uzbekistan as well, 98% population are Muslims, but only 5 of them know what murabaha is. 0.1% know what musawama is, and the operations of these banks are based on those 2 transactions. We usually think of sukuk as something that large corporations or sovereigns do. Not always. I live in UAE, and we have a company called Pure Harvest Smart Farms that raised $50 million through innovative sukuk. They added warrants, and so it became attractive and less risky. Actually, Shua did that. Islamic microfinance and challenger banks, Hijra. Many of you probably familiar with the CEO of Hijra, Dima Jani. He's a very very important proponent of Islamic finance, and he actually has a key phrase that Islamic finance is for everyone. It's like a Beyond Burger, you know, even the meat eaters eat it. Well, I know I did. I'm not going to tell you how I felt after that, but I did. So basically, Islamic finance is just for everyone, and but there is a contract, you are being ethical with your clients as a funder, and the clients are very ethical with you. For example, Hijra has about 100%, or at least it claims 100% repayment rate. So there is no defaults whatsoever. And basically, I write, as a correspondent, I write about Islamic venture capital for one of the Islamic finance news outlet. And if I describe you a process of Islamic venture capital, it differs from the conventional venture capitals. Here you have entrepreneur spends his money, then you have triple F, friends, family, fools that spend their money, then you have business angels, accelerators, and then you have venture capital firms. In Islamic finance environment, the middle section is missing, which is angels and accelerators. Basically, once your friends and family spend their money, there is nowhere to go. I mean, if the company is not ready for venture capital. So that's why this niche is covered by 2 particular directions. One of them is crowdfunding. I gave you example of Ethis is a company run by Umar Munshi, one of the most prolific, probably serial entrepreneur out of Malaysia. So where you have many small investors pulling their funds to buy some equity in the company. And this is probably one of the most convenient way of funding, because these investors don't get involved into your operations. They don't stay away from your business. They're not predatory like many venture capitalists are. So basically, they just give money and wait up for the results. But more than that, I like DG Waqf. DG Waqf is a company that I set up over 5 years ago. It gives grants. So essentially, it invests money and receive funds. But as a Waqf, we don't support, let's say, a mosque, or we don't support religious education. We support entrepreneurs. Basically, we give out grants, about $50,000 per grantor. And so it's very transparent, because grantors, they select themselves who will get the funds. Okay, I'm running out of time, so I'll just go quickly to my last slide. It's about global Islamic talent. So basically, we have a concept of Ummah. So in our digital world, it's much, much easier to implement than ever before. So do we have Sharia-compliant brain drain? Yes, we do. You know that cities like Riyadh and Dubai actively recruit Islamic entrepreneurs from all over the world. Well, frankly speaking, it's much easier to get a visa to Dubai than to get a visa to London. So, there's a lot more money in Saudi Arabia than in the UK, at least for these particular purposes. So, basically, I would like to bring the concept of Islamic venture capital hubs, or Islamic fintech hubs. These are the cities. We did the rankings. I only bring the top 10, but there are actually 32. This is a ranking that we did together with the Islamic Finance News. So those rankings are based on 3 categories: regulatory approvals, capital available, and of course, the most important, talent. Talent is the key. If the talent can freely move, and people can freely move to Dubai, now it's less freely, but still you can go to Saudi Arabia. So the first, number 1, Kuala Lumpur, is actually, it's probably going to slide in rankings within a year or 2. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Vladimir. My next speaker is Mr. Rafiuddin Shekor, who is the CEO and Managing Director of Dinar Standard. Now, we've heard from the earlier 2 speakers the challenges that the Islamic finance sector is facing, and now we've heard about some of the principles of Islamic finance which should drive the change. So listening to Vladimir there talking about the long-term impact that Islamic finance has, the importance that looking at total return. Now, I would like to ask Mr. Rafiuddin, who runs his own management consultancy firm, who advises sovereign wealth funds, private equity firms, focused on not just Islamic finance, but the Islamic economy as a whole. Taking some of those Islamic finance principles, can you give us some case studies or bring this to life in terms of where these inherent Islamic finance principles actually do benefit and do actually work?
Thank you, Suhail, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. I always like to start by sending peace and blessing upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So I ask all of you to send salawat. And one of my favorite sayings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is, if you don't thank people, you have not thanked God. So I want to also start by, first of all, thanking and sending du'as to the late Sheikh Saleh Kamel to have initiated such a platform. May this be a legacy of Sadaqah for him and his family, inshallah. I also want to thank His Excellency Yusuf Khalawi and the team for inviting me and for organizing this, and inshallah creating an amazing vision for the future. And may Allah grant this project continued success. I also would like to, I think it would be amiss for me to not start by acknowledging something that's very painful that's happening to the Islamic world. We're talking about ethics and values, and I think it would be amiss if we didn't take a moment to acknowledge the atrocity that's happening to a huge community of the Islamic world, and I would say the wider world in Palestine and Lebanon today. And I think it's something we should be thinking about, at minimum, saying a dua for them. So I ask you to invoke a dua for them as well. Now, I'm not an academic. I'm not a theologian. Previously, there was a session, we heard about where, we've been hearing about great work from the academia on the maqasid sharia. Right? We have, I would say, in the work that my firm, Dinar Standard, does, as Sohail introduced, where we work practically with investment funds, we're working with corporates in the Muslim world, we're working with government agencies in applying these principles. I would say that the theory, the academia, is way advanced. I think when it comes to defining the role of Islamic values in the form of the Sharia principles and how the economics of the world should be run, I think we have it figured out very well. From Malaysia to Saudi Arabia to Indonesia to the academic papers we see, I think it's just incredible work that exists. The question I have as a practitioner is, as advanced as our theory of maqasid sharia and Islamic finances, do we see it applied practically today, and to what extent? So let me ask you a question. We all are consumers, right? We all, when we talk about the economy is built of businesses, corporates, brands, and that drives the economic engine for companies. And Dr. Muhammad, you also pointed out the statistics about the seven tech, if I'm correct, you said 7 tech firms' market valuation is more than the GDP of the 57 Muslim majority countries. Incredibly shocking. So let me ask you, if you can just shout out a few names that you think are companies or brands from the Muslim world that you think you would say espouse or have a good bit, nobody's perfect, would have a good bit of reflection of these Islamic economic values. Can I get some names? Yes.
Masdar.
No, from the Muslim world.
Masdar.
Masdar, sure, but I mean, okay, and for those of you who may or may not know Masdar is the sustainability-focused initiative of UAE government. I would question at a global level the impact, but that's what I'm asking. And I'll give you the context. I saw a hand up there. When you look at top 100 global brands in the world today, keeping in mind Muslim OIC countries represent almost 20% of the world's population, almost 17% of the global GDP, yet none, zero, are from the Muslim majority countries, the top 100 brands in of the world. Top 100 most, all sorts of ranking. Top 100 food companies in the world. You would imagine Muslims, we're foodies, right? We love our food. Zero. So again, let me take some names of brands that you think are from the Muslim world that you feel espouse good ethical values. Yeah? Huda Beauty. A lot of amazing entrepreneurship is happening, but at a global brand level, I don't think Huda, and you know Huda Beauty, a lot of great, if some of you are familiar with our work as Dinar Standard, we map all the Islamic lifestyle brands that are emerging from Indonesia to Malaysia, but again, at a truly global level. Very few, even if great enterprising work is happening. So, but comparatively, how many of you have heard of a company called Patagonia or Tom Shoes? Just raise your hand, right? These are brands that are today recognized by the world as some of the most ethical brands, right? Again, we don't have these brands that are reflecting all of the great Sharia, maqasid Sharia concepts we're talking about. And so my goal today is to share with you the fact that we should not be losing hope, that on the other side there are brands that are sizable from the Muslim majority countries that are applying these principles in different ways and shape and form. That should give us the confidence and encouragement that there's application of of the Islamic principles, Islamic finance principles, wider Islamic economic principles that are happening. So if I can, all right. So what I'm going to do is just quickly go through some of those case studies. And just to summarize, first of all, I will share with you 2 case studies a bit in detail, and I will cover a few of the startup examples also, as well as our humble effort as a management consulting firm who's also trying to apply Islamic principles in how we do our work and how we bring impact. So it's not just about the impact, but it's also about how we do our work, because that's all packaged in the Islamic values. So the things that we're going to cover, I'm not going to talk about the principles of Islamic economics. We have great thought leadership, and we've heard about the principles of underlying, but the case studies will reflect social justice and equality, Islamic moral values, obviously Islamic financial principles. And the sectors I'm going to cover these case studies from are from food, finance, retail, fashion, and our firm advisory. So I will go through each one of them a bit in detail. So the first company, before I go to Savola Group, how many of you have heard of Savola Group or would know of? All right, a few names. So this is a major, I would say, multinational from Saudi Arabia. It is a multi-billion-dollar annual revenue edible oil producing company, and has production and brands all across the MENA region and expanding further out to Southeast Asia as well. And one of the things when Savola Groups that I really was impressed with is similar to global corporates like General Electric or Intel, and some of you who are students of this would know that they're thought leaders and they're global leaders on it. The way Savola Group had established its corporate governance is based on Islamic values. So today, the modern board, corporate board that sits, its value structure is anchored in Islamic principles. It's inspired. They have made it universal, however, but it's inspired by Islamic principles of taqwa, ihsan, adl, and there's a whole thesis of Islamic principles that they've applied. Now, this is a living, breathing corporate that's multi-billion-dollar. These values are trickling down. Given I'm out of time, I'll quickly go through this as well. And so I would encourage you to look at the way Savola Group has set up its corporate culture, very much inspired by it. The other example from the other side of Asia, Southeast Asia, Johor Corp. Those of our audiences from Southeast Asia may recognize Johor is an investment development entity in Malaysia of Johor province, and they're a multi-billion-dollar entity that is doing investments across various domains, and they're anchored, their mission is to empower communities through sustainable corporate growth rooted in Islamic values. They're creating lasting socioeconomic impact by integrating Islamic economic principles with modern corporate governance, ensuring sustainable development and community well-being. Johor has one of the most innovative Waqf models that we've seen in modern times applied. They have today a Waqf model that enables a healthcare system, which under the brand of KPJ Healthcare. It is a multi-million-dollar major enterprise, property enterprises, and so forth. So I'm just going to fly through this. And this is their model. It's called the Islamic Waqf model that they have established. Lastly, I will just highlight that as Dinar Standard, we are also, as a management consulting firm, aspiring to be, today when you look at the management consulting world, none of them exist from the Muslim world. It's the Deloitte and the McKinsey, and they're all great, but we want to aspire to incorporate our values, and this is some of the impact we've had through it. But anchored in our work is also our core value system that is anchored in taqwa, ihsan, amana, and adl. I don't have too much time, but I want to share with you practical example of what it means day to day and how we do work. And my colleague and partner based in UK, Connor Murphy, is right here. So those of you who would want to get in touch with our team here, Connor is local. So one of the things is when we look at profit maximization as a corporate, we are a profit-making corporate. Our profit maximization approach is anchored in God centricity, God consciousness, which means We don't worry about competition because we know risk is from Allah. That is a paradigm shift for us on how we do business. And I think our team and our clients and our our partners will give you case studies of that. Professional success consultancy is a very toxic environment, those of you who've been and are in consulting. We have created an environment that's a very family-focused and balanced life. Ikhlaq and adab in all communication. We have a very good culture of ikhlaq and adab in how we deal with each other. And also our client base is driving. We select our clients. We reject clients that are not focused on adab. And some of the other examples to close out with are Modernisa, Warda, Al-Islami. Modernisa is from Turkey. They're the biggest platform for modest fashion in the world, working towards, I would say, a unicorn. Warda is an amazing example of a cosmetics brand, and they are certainly working towards to be a global brand. Al-Islami as a halal food brand. So with that, I will conclude, and thank you for listening. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you very much. What I'll do now is I'll just maybe ask a question to each of the panelists just to follow up those fantastic presentations and then just invite some questions from the floor to the extent that we have time. So if I could start with you, Mohammed. We heard from you this earlier a short while ago about some of the challenges. And one that sort of stood out to me was the sort of institutional weaknesses or lack of infrastructure in certain jurisdictions. How much do you think that is a disconnect between a political will to put in place the infrastructure which is favorable for, that works for Islamic finance versus other economic or socio factors? And to the extent that there is a lack of political will, any ideas as to how we drive some momentum to sort of persuade and encourage that infrastructure to be in place?
Okay, thank you so much. So some of the challenges, I will say, are coming from exogenous pressures, pressures from without. And I speak because I'm talking from a resource-rich nation, and we know that the way policies are made in some of these countries is not for the vested interest of the citizenry or the country. Policies can actually be formed in a better way to be able to add value to the lives of the people. The current global economic order really is like a jungle. It's either you eat or you get eaten, kind of. So, and because of this, we've seen that where leaders in some countries, particularly in the global south, driving development, and it's not for the interest of some other nations. We've seen where such doesn't go well, and you have external pressures that in some cases lead to transition by bringing in changes in governance and all that. So some of the leaders in the OIC countries are not in the best position to be able to drive the kind of changes we expect, because the political will is either there or not. And you can't expect the average person to be able to drive that. So the hands really are tight for the citizenry to be able to make change around that. The best they can do is at a micro level, individual level, to try and drive and practice some of the values of Islamic economy to be able to better their lot.
Thank you, Mohammed. I was obviously very pleased to see Naz Shah earlier on stage, not only because she's from Bradford, not only because she's my local MP, but also because I think engagement with governments on this topic is really important, because unless we proactively and positively reach out and engage with the powers that be to create the framework, whether it's in terms of governance, whether it's in terms of regulations to support Islamic finance to thrive, I think we will always have an uphill challenge. I want to move on to you, Vladimir. You talked about Islamic finance principles, and you talked about sort of the long-term impact and the returns that are made by following ethical, sustainable practices. From my perspective, I see a lot. I do a lot of disputes work. And one of the greatest risks I see over the next 10 years, not just for the Islamic finance industry, but just across the sector as a whole, is institutions, whether that's sovereign wealth funds, whether that's financial institutions, projecting an image or forecasting things or making statements which are not true, which are not backed up. So for example, over the last 3-4 years, I think we're seeing a lot of organizations, a lot of funds being labeled as green, as ethical. People will talk about impact financing. And it's all a little bit arbitrary in terms of how do you measure impact? Where's the data that sits behind it? If people are saying this is green or this is sustainable financing, how do we actually measure it? Or how much of it is genuinely just to get shareholders or investors in to invest in something? So to what extent do we think Islamic finance is immune from or can protect itself from issues such as greenwashing, from challenges? Are there any safeguards in place within the industry to prevent that sort of thing happening?
Well, it can't protect itself. My answer will be very brief because it is actually brief. What we need as an industry as a whole, there is nothing specific related to Sharia-compliant finance, Islamic finance that can combat this issue. We need 1, 2, 3, couple of major scandals in this area, which will bring governmental investigation and involvement, similar to what we had with carbon credits. When it was established that Vera, the biggest issuer of carbon credits, the verification agency, had 84% of carbon credits bogus, they were fake. The measures were taken, and the entire procedure of audit and verification of carbon credits was redone from ground zero. We need same with greenwashing, because these claims are, of course, they're fantastic. Everybody makes them. Even the biggest polluters make the claims that they're green. And well, some of them actually buy carbon credits and declare, so we are carbon neutral. And there's nothing we can do until there's something major happens, which will bring government regulation and audit.
Yeah. As depressing as that sounds,
it is depressing, but
as depressing as that sounds,
yeah.
I think you're right. You're only going to get the level of scrutiny and the safeguards as and when something goes wrong, unfortunately.
Totally.
And unfortunately, that's a reality. Rafi, if I can come to you next. One of the things that I think one of the earlier speakers, it was the Bosnian minister, said something which I found really insightful and resonated a lot with me. He focused on the word Islamic rather than Islam. And I think a lot of what you've just said there about an Islamic economy is about the principles, a bit like what Vladimir was talking about. You've given some fantastic case studies there. But as you said, query how much of that is being done truly on a global scale, on a global level. How do we go out there and make that global impact? How do we make other organizations realize the value of Islamic principles? Because for us, it's not confining Islamic finance, for example, to Muslim practitioners or Muslim people. We are ambassadors for our faith. So how do we go out with these case studies and make this really ambassadorial for our faith?
Absolutely a critical thing for us to bridge. Today, I was asking about brands, and many of you will know about Grameen, right? Yeah. And I think we would acknowledge that Grameen is a well-known global success story, or was acknowledged as the pioneer in microfinance, which is part of ethics and so forth. However, it was not Sharia compliant, right? So, so there is a big disconnect, I would say, between the theory of Islamic economy that we are discussing, and we're having all these amazing summits and forums. And my question is, where are these organizations here? Why are they not here? They should be on the stage actually more than us as academics or advisors, right? Because they are the channels of enablement. They're the ones who drive the socio-economic prosperity. As Dr. Muhammad rightly pointed out, we're behind because we don't control our own money. We don't control our own economy. A fact many of you may or may not know, forget technology that we don't make, forget the planes and the advanced stuff that we don't make. Even halal food, we don't make. When I say we, meaning Muslims. The top 7 largest exporter of halal food products today are non-Muslim majority countries. United States, France, China, India, etc.
Brazil.
So I think there is a huge disconnect. And I would say, we have to be positive, as our tradition of Islam tells us to always be hopeful and positive. So I think what's important, that's why I shared case studies. We have a ranking of emerging brands. Some of the brands, from the audience we heard even. I think this next generation of entrepreneurship that's happening, including from UK, by the way, Sohail, I think at a global level, some of the global Islamic fintechs, some of the best Islamic fintechs at a global level are coming out of UK. Some of the best brands of Islamic lifestyle, we heard modest fashion brands are coming from UK or the United States. So I think we have to engage them. We have to, and they may not be the multi-billion-dollar large enterprises today, but they, along with the existing top players from the OIC countries, which we also map. We have the ranking of top 100, actually top 5,000 corporates from OIC countries, they're there. We have our top 100 list, the minimum annual revenue of the Muslim-owned enterprises from Muslim-majority countries is $5 billion annual revenue. These are large enterprises, Indofood in Indonesia, Ulker in Turkey, Savola, Al-Marai, you name it, Emirates, so forth. These are brands. So I think a bottom-up movement that's happening with startup entrepreneurs, and I think I would consider myself an older generation now, but the millennial Gen Z entrepreneurship within Islamic values-based ecosystem, I think, is the most exciting thing that's happening. Dr. Muhammad, I think even in Nigeria, we're seeing the entrepreneurship from the young Nigerians in context of Islamic lifestyle space. Incredible.
Yeah.
So I think bringing them to such forums would bridge that gap.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. I think we've probably got time for one, maybe 2 questions, assuming the answers are limited. So any questions for the panelists? If I can see any hands go up. Yes, don't know if there's a mic for the gentleman.
Serial questionnaire.
Hello, hi. My question is more directed towards Mr. Rafi. I just want to ask you, big companies like Aramco and Emirates and in construction, Bin Laden construction, what would it take them to basically switch to Islamic finance? Would they see it as profitable? Would it benefit them? How can you sell this finance, the system of finance to those sort of companies? Because they're pretty global and pretty rich.
Thank you. It's been, I'll make it very quick because in interest of time, it's been a very hard sell because, the economic system we are in, shareholder maximization, profit maximization, and we hear from a lot of the scholars here, Islamic principle of economy is very different, but we are operating in a model where profit maximization is the concern of the board of these companies, right? The board is responsible for the shareholders want the maximum return. This is still the case in most of the large corporates across OIC countries, Turkey, Indonesia, Malaysia, because they have to return maximum. The key that we've been able to crack, and I'll give you an example, alhamdulillah, we've been involved in a project whereby the largest sovereign wealth fund, one of the largest sovereign wealth funds in the world, has established a halal product investment company. And we were involved in making that case to them that they need to put and invest in Islamic values-based, halal and tayyib values-based product and services. By making a business case, we need to be able to show that this is actually good economically for us as well. I find that to be the successful way to get in. And when we see the wider value of it, I think the momentum will build.
Can I add just 10 seconds? If Aramco goes full Islamic and it goes on the capital markets, it will destroy Sukuk market. It will suck up all the liquidity. It's too big, and our Sukuk market's too small.
Thank you both. We've actually run out of time, so I'm going to thank my panel of speakers. And if I was to try and just summarize my thoughts on the session and what we've heard from our speakers, if we think about pathways to prosperity, to me, it sounds like, listening to all the speakers and all the speakers that we've heard so far earlier today, it's a question of we have the answers. We are blessed and fortunate to have the best guidance available to us through the Quran and the Sunnah. And I think it's about espousing Islamic values, which will truly be the answer for prosperity. I think that requires collaboration within the industry. I think it's supporting one another so that we grow and we grow together. I'd like to thank all my speakers. Thank you again. It's been a fantastically engaging session, and please do reach out to them after.